For a little bit of backstory, I was 20 when this happened to me, and it is by far one of the most creepiest experiences I've ever had. About a year ago, my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer and had very intense complications. He was a heavy smoker and a major alcoholic, and while my mom and I tried to get him the help he needed, he would have random drunken outbursts as to why he didn't need it. At first, we thought the cancer was early stage, but after multiple visits to the hospital, it was clear that it was not. Eventually, things got worse, and after his passing, my mom and I had moved to another state along with my brother for me to go to college and for her to find a better job. I attended school in a rural area of southern Wisconsin that was very much tucked away from the other towns or cities. It was a private school that only accepted students who were mainly focused on science majors. Chemistry, biology, astronomy, you name it. One day, I was eating lunch at my college's dining hall when I happened to glance over to my left and see a guy walking towards me while smiling. I focused back on eating my lunch when he comes right up to my table and sits down in front of me. He introduced himself as Seth, and I said that it was nice to meet him. Before I go on, let me give you a brief description about Seth. He was tall and lanky with blonde hair and wore an abnormally large pair of glasses. A nerdy type of guy, you could say. I'd say right away, this kid started coming off to me in a very weird way. He started talking about how he'd love to play video games and how he has all this money that makes his friends jealous. His "I'm so cool" rant went on for about a good 10 minutes before he finally said that he had to go, and he then asked me for my number. For whatever reason, I ended up giving it to him, which, looking back, was a stupid decision on my part. As time went on, this kid only became more weird. He'd be constantly staring at me from a short distance at lunch, and we'd even be outside on the sidewalk of the school where my mom picks me up. He would send me strange text messages and call me nonstop. If I didn't answer, he would begin to leave annoyed voicemails, talking about how he wanted to see me and talk to me. This process continued on for about a month or so before I finally blocked his phone number. Then one day, I got a notification from my Snapchat from a user named Sether the Better. It was him. I have no idea as to how he got it, but it took me a few seconds to open the message. And when I did, I felt sick to my stomach. There was a picture of a dark road, and in front of it was a house. The picture was a bit blurry, but I then came to the realization that it was my house. At that point, I ran straight to my mom's room and explained everything to her and my brother. Needless to say, my brother gets out his .22 from his closet and went outside looking around. He came back 5 minutes later and found no one, but had found several shoe prints in the snow right next to my bedroom window. I never heard or saw Seth again after that one incident. He never returned to school and never messaged me again. I'm not sure what his intentions were, but if he was right near my bedroom, they obviously weren't good. When I was in my late 20s, I had moved to Massachusetts after graduating college with my master's degree in business. It was a very hard 6 years of my life, but I was proud of myself for finally achieving my goals and looking forward to having a decent future. It took me about a good month or so to finally settle down after getting my own apartment. One day, I had received a call back from a company I was applying for a job to and had asked if I could come in for an interview. The place was located in downtown Boston, and seeing as I didn't own a car, I decided to take the train as it was much faster and costed a lot less than the bus. I arrive at the station, put down my bag, and start going over a few tips on what to say and what not to say during an interview. After what seemed like forever of practicing several times, the train finally comes and I get on, still practicing in my head. Suddenly, my phone dings and I look down to see that I got a text message from an unknown number. I knew the number was from the same state because of the area code, but what it read made me feel a bit uneasy. It read the exact words, "Hi Stacy, where are you going?" I reply asking who it was, but whoever was on the other end didn't even acknowledge my question. They responded with, "Are you going somewhere important?" At this point, I figure it's one of my friends back home playing some sort of joke, as I had told a few people I had an interview to go to. A third message popped up, and this time it was an image. Upon closer inspection, I realized that it was a photo of me on a train, the exact same train that I was on. However, given the fact that the train was packed with a bunch of people, I couldn't tell who took that picture. I stood up cautiously, looking around for anyone, but I wasn't going to go around accusing people of anything. Long story short, I get off the train and open my phone to get another message. This last one made my blood run cold. It was a picture of what appeared to be the outside of my apartment building, and I immediately blocked that number. After my interview, I went straight to the police to see if they could try and somehow track down the number, but I didn't know if they could. The next day, the police had informed me that the number being used was fake and was untraceable. I was utterly shocked by this and didn't know how it was untraceable. Either way, I went to change my phone number the very next day, and I never heard from this mystery stalker again. However, I still have questions about this whole ordeal. How did this person know my name? How did he know what train I got on? And how did he know where I lived? I don't know who this person was, but it was one of the most creepiest experiences I've ever had. This story is told in the perspective of a female. I never told this story in full detail to anyone other than my family and close friends, but I feel now is a good time to get it off my chest. When I was 24, I had just moved out of state to go to college in Washington with my boyfriend. We lived on campus, but because of the school's policy, he had to bunk with another guy as opposite genders weren't allowed. The news media was ultra-conservative and was very sensitive as to what people said or posted online. Since I didn't have any friends or know anyone, I decided to meet some new people online just for fun to talk to. Nothing serious relationship-wise. I did some quick searching online, signed up for a few apps to meet new people, and eventually met with a really nice guy on OkCupid. His name was Matt, and we hit it off well. He had a great taste for music and shared lots of songs with me and seemed to be interested in the same topics as me. Now, keep in mind that I was no way looking for a relationship with this guy. I have a lot of online friends who I never even met before, and yes, my boyfriend knew about Matt. Matt understood and respected that I had a boyfriend and that we just talk as friends. I genuinely enjoyed talking to Matt. We would play video games together and he'd even help me with my schoolwork sometimes. Our friendship went on for about a good month or so, but then it got weird. He one day asked me if I had sex and if I liked it. I told him that I didn't feel comfortable answering that and that it was inappropriate since we were just friends. He'd immediately respond, feeling guilty, talking about how he was sorry and that he didn't want to make me feel uncomfortable, and then change the subject. But as time progressed, he'd always try to bring sex back into the conversations, no matter how many times I told him not to. Our conversations kept getting more and more personal before I one day just stopped answering his calls. About a week later, he texted me asking if I went to this school. Down below the message was a picture of a building which was in fact my school. My heart sank into the pit of my stomach as I saw this. I didn't respond to him and just blocked him on all of my socials and my phone. A few days later, our school was under a hurricane watch and I was checking my email for any updates. For some reason, I checked my spam inbox, which I never do, and that's when I saw an email from, you guessed it, Matt. I have no idea as to how he got it, and I didn't want to know. When I opened the email, there was just one photo, which was my dorm number. I showed this to my boyfriend, and him and I had to file a report to campus security. But seeing as this was before stalking laws were invented, there was nothing the police could really do. After that, I never heard from Matt again. I'd like to think that it was just some elaborate joke, but then again, I've always wondered about that. I'm a 22-year-old female, and this happened about a few weeks ago. For some context, I work at my local Starbucks as a barista and would oftentimes have to work super early in the mornings as I had classes during the afternoon and night. This was during the global pandemic, and our state was one of the states that reported a high record of increasing cases. And seeing as fall was rolling in, it was no big surprise. Because of this, our manager obviously made us clean the shop like crazy and made sure we were on top of it. This included wiping down the tables and making sure everyone wore a mask. One morning, a coworker of mine had told me to go clean the outside tables as a few customers had left. I put on my sweater and mask and start spraying the table when I looked to my right and noticed a guy sitting in his car in the parking lot. Now, this wasn't too strange as the Starbucks was located in the city, so you'd have a lot of people everywhere. I go back inside and continue my place at the counter when the guy from the car walks in. At this point, I realized that he was not a pleasant-looking man. His eyes were red and his skin was pale, and his hair was a mess. He came right up to the counter, and as usual, I greeted him with a, "Hi, welcome to Starbucks. What can I get for you?" He responds with, "I'll just have a medium black coffee, sweetie." I awkwardly smile and tell him his total. He then proceeds to take out a $5 bill and then gives it to me, making sure our hands touch. I tell him that it would be right out, and he goes to sit at a nearby table. While brewing his coffee, I see him constantly staring at me through the corner of my eye, but I tried to make it seem like I wasn't interested and just focused on working. Once the coffee was done, I bring it over to him and tell him to enjoy while walking back to the counter. So, Kate, what time do you get off? At first, I was confused as to how he knew my name, but I then realized that I had my name tag on. I quietly cussed to myself and turned around to face him. I answer him nervously and lie, telling him that I got off at 6, when in reality I got off at 4. He asks me if he could pick me up to give me a ride home, and I politely decline, telling him that I already have a ride. He went from just your average Starbucks customer to just plain rude. Thankfully, he takes his coffee and walks right out the door. I begin to tell my coworker about the guy, and she gets this shocked look on her face and recommends I tell the manager. For some reason, at that point, I didn't end up reporting him to our manager, which, looking back, was a stupid decision. Finally, 4 p.m. comes around and I tell my coworker that I'm leaving. I go outside to my car, making sure the guy was nowhere in sight. Thankfully, he wasn't. Being a paranoid person who watches way too many horror movies, I thought for sure that he would be out here waiting for me. The next day when I come into work, my coworker comes over to me and says, "Kate, is everything okay?" in somewhat of a worried voice. I respond with yes and tell her about the guy from yesterday. What she said next chilled me to the bone. That guy came in the store just before 6. He said he was here to pick you up. My heart sank into the pit of my stomach, and I told her that I lied to him, claiming that I got off at 6, which is why he was here. I then told my manager everything that had happened, and he said that he would keep an eye out for him. The most disturbing part, however, is later that day, my coworker had told me that when he got out of his car, she saw 2 hidden men in the back seat. After that, I quit my job at Starbucks as I didn't feel safe, and I now work at a grocery store. God only knows what would have happened to me had I told him the real time I got off.